myself situated here. Thank you, everyone. I am really delighted to be here, and for many reasons, but the number one reason is the whole idea of consciousness and technology in order to scale among humanity, a shift in consciousness personally, socially, globally, has been the mission of HeartMath since the beginning. It's been our passion. Rollin and I have been working together for probably 40 years now in various and sundry enterprises, but when our founder, Dr. Childry, invited us to start a research institute, which we started in 1990, to see if we could see correlates in the human system of spirit, how the heart, brain, nervous system communicate, and see if we could help meditators and people who wouldn't even think about meditation, ordinary folks who didn't believe in anything, be able to get more in sync with themselves. It was just an exciting adventure, and it still continues to be, because the world's starting to wake up. And this is our view of what's going on, that we're at a new threshold of consciousness, and you can say that it looks out there like things are falling apart. Of course, chaos precedes coherence, often in nature. And while things are falling apart, there's a momentum. More and more people are saying, what do we do? Where do we go for solutions? And as the saying goes, when you don't know where else to go for a solution in your life, go to your heart for an answer. And people thought that was a metaphor, but it really isn't. And we're going to explain why it isn't, and then how we can do it more consistently. So one of our visions is to help activate the heart of humanity, help our hearts wake up to the potential that's really there. And our definition of heart intelligence really comes from our research in seeing that the heart is an intelligence system. And I'm going to share some of that research with you. But you know, all the ancient cultures across the world have called the heart a source of wisdom, a source of intuition, and these cultures didn't even know about each other. So we wanted to really research what's behind that. And heart intelligence, picture it as a flow of awareness, understanding, and intuitive guidance we experience when the mind and emotions are brought into coherent alignment with the heart. We'll explain what a coherent alignment with the heart means. And this intelligence steps down the power of love from universal source, meaning connecting with our larger self, into our life's interactions in practical, approachable ways which inform us of a straighter path to our fulfillment. So we have a book of that title that Rollin, myself, our founder, Dr. Childry, and another person, Howard Martin, co-authored. It's back at the table there if you want to look at it, and we have some free copies for people who are really wanting to read it. So our mission, and there's a lot to this mission statement, which we keep changing and upgrading as the world is more accepting of a sort of spiritual mission statement like this. When we first started out, we really wanted to just speak to the streets. So our mission was really more like how the power of the heart can help with health and wellness. You know, something that wasn't, too wide. But this is really what we've been around all along. It's the mission of HeartMath, not just the Institute, but all of the HeartMath companies, is to help people bring their physical, mental, and emotional systems into balanced alignment with their heart's intuitive guidance. This unfolds the path for becoming heart-empowered individuals who choose the way of love, which they demonstrate through compassionate care for the well-being of themselves, others, and planet Earth. So, there are two HeartMath organizations. So the HeartMath Institute, which is a 501c3 nonprofit. Rollin is the director of research there and a senior vice president. And the HeartMath Institute actually started in 1991 and has really been responsible for most of our research, working with the scientific advisors and developing a lot of techniques and tools and training programs based on the science and a lot of research collaborations. HeartMath Incorporated is the company that actually takes a lot of the research and productizes it. and really provides it to corporations, all health professionals, hospitals, healthcare systems. And we developed the technology that you see back on the table there that we'll be talking about to be able to help people train in this state of coherence. So what is this state of coherence? We define personal coherence as an optimal state in which heart, mind, and emotions are aligned and in sync. Now, this is a physiological state. What happens when you get heart, brain, or mind, and emotions in sync is that it really facilitates the harmonious function of the autonomic nervous system, the immune system, the hormonal system. So we're really operating more in flow or in energetic coordination. And part of our goal is to give people tools and techniques and technology to get there quick. We're all going to get out. We have a saying at HeartMath, when you get out of your heart, get back in. And there's ways to do that. So, heart-brain communication is something we researched. And what's really interesting is, you know, the 1990s was called the decade of the brain. But in many ways, it's the decade of the heart as well. That's when we started, but not just us. There's a whole new field of neurocardiology that began. And there's a whole discovery that the heart was much more than a blood pump. Some of this had been discovered earlier, but it just kind of came together, seeing that the heart is this amazing intelligence system. It's actually sending information to the brain upstairs, telling the brain what to do, whereas, I don't know about you, but in my college classes and high school classes, I always taught the brain controls the heart. But in many ways, it's the other way around. And turns things upside down. That's a paradigm shift. And that's what we've been so focused on, really understanding and investigating, what is this heart? What all can it do? And how is it connected with who we really, really are? So one of the discoveries was the heart has its own little brain, an actual functional little brain composed of neurons, sensory neurons, inside the heart. It's independent from the brain and the head, and these neurons can sense, feel, learn, and remember. And this heart brain is actually sending information to the head brain and sending more information upstairs than the brain is sending back. It's a two-way communication system. But one of the things we began to investigate and productize, both in our training programs and our technology, is that the patterns in these neural signals from the heart can be seen in a heart rhythm pattern and the heart rate variability, and they especially affect brain centers involved in perception, emotional experience, and this last word, which can sound a little stuffy, but it's probably the most important, our ability to self-regulate, our ability to shift mood, shift emotional state, our ability to manage our reactions, manage our perceptions, really develop that self-mastery that we all want. So this is a heart rate variability trace. How many of you, before you came here, had heard of HeartMath? Quite a few of you. How many of you have heard of heart rate variability? Okay. So heart rate variability is looking at the beat-to-beat changes in heart rate. So this is your EKG, heartbeat, and here's your heart rate. And it's changing with every beat. So the rate is going from 60 to 70 to 80. And it's changing, and most people don't know that. They just think it's an average. Oh, my heart rate is 65 beats per minute, because that's what most heart rate sensors measure and give you an average. But if you can look at the pattern of beat-to-beat changes, there's a lot of information in it. And one of the things that we discovered is that your emotional state changes this heart rate variability. So when you're feeling frustrated, anxious, worried, stressed, in other words, there's a real herky-jerky rhythm. And this rhythm, the more frustrated, the more stressed you feel, the more that looks like an earthquake. It kind of reflects how we feel inside. And when you're feeling positive emotions or genuine heart qualities, heartfelt feelings, as the saying goes, of love, of care, of appreciation, of compassion, of kindness, of respect, those genuine feelings change this rhythmic pattern into a very harmonious waveform. And it reflects more how we're feeling inside, in the flow, in harmony. And this, in physics, is a sine wave, which is called a coherent waveform. So that's one reason we started talking about heart rhythm coherence, or heart coherence. But you know, the word coherence, or coherent, is used in dialogue, you know, a coherent discussion, a coherent plan. And it means ordered, harmonious. But what it also means is that coherent thinking requires coherent feeling. And this slide is showing how the heart rhythm pattern, which is communicated here through the vagal nerve, impacts brain centers. So if you have a stress pattern, that signal goes up here, affects your blood pressure, your autonomic nervous system regulation, and there's two pathways. One is the amygdala, the emotional memory center. So say you've had a traumatic experience, and when you start to feel worried, that comes back, it's re-triggered. And that's because the amygdala is looking to match pattern and recall a familiar pattern. So many healthcare professionals are using our technology, our emWave and Inner Balance technology with patients to be able to shift the pattern and be able to actually have the signal from heart to the amygdala and the cells of the amygdala synchronized to the heartbeat. It powers up their healing from PTSD, or any of us that have strong emotional memories like anxiety habits, or fear habits, or worry habits, or frustration habits. All those habits can be really hard to change, but with self-regulation of the heart rhythm pattern, we can harness the power of our physiology, the power of heart coherence, and facilitate those pattern changes, a neural habit change. And that's really powerful if you think about it. One of the things I'm really passionate about is the fact that this can really help people, along with other modalities, heal quicker from trauma, because as human beings, humanity, we just keep creating trauma for each other, don't we? And, you know, and then we take years to heal from. It's crazy, but that's what we do. And so part of what we want to do is find the physiology that can help us really power up our healing, and that involves the heart's intelligence and power. So the other pathway here is to the thalamus, and the thalamus is the brain center that synchronizes cortical activity. So this coherent signal goes all the way up to the frontal lobes and helps facilitate our bigger picture thinking. Love, care, compassion, kindness aren't just nice heart qualities. They are key ingredients in connecting with bigger picture thinking, in our, call it your higher self, or empathy, or compassion, or being able to really walk in someone else's shoes, or see what the wholeness needs. And that also leads right into intuitive discernment. So enhancing human intelligence, you can't just look at the neurofeedback, the head stuff. The heart has to be involved because its signal is influencing what's happening upstairs. And it's a very powerful signal, and it's also a place where we can interact most readily, because we feel a lot in this area. We don't feel a lot in our brain. We don't say, we say I love you with all my heart. We don't say I love you with all my brain, right? It's almost funny, because that's not where we experience the sense of who we are, the deeper feelings. So if we can harness those deeper feelings and shift with the aid of consciousness technologies, with the aid of simple training tools, then we can perhaps have a real baseline shift. And that's one of the things that we want. So one of the things about coherence, that I think is really powerful is what we call the carryover effect. Now, if you practice sitting in actual heart rhythm coherence, HRV coherence, and that's one reason we created the technology feedback. I mean, I'm a 40-plus year meditator. I still use it just to make sure I'm really there, not fooling myself, and get myself really psychophysiologically in sync, and then do whatever other intentions or radiation or meditation practices. And that's what we recommend, is get in sync, because even 5 minutes has a carryover effect that can help you stay composed, less triggered, more in the flow throughout the day. So this is showing a difference between coherence and relaxation. Some people confuse coherence and relaxation. And when we work with athletes, or we work with executives or in companies for using coherence practice to get into a high-performing state, relaxation isn't really a high-performing state. It's essential, but you want to be present. You want to be ready. You want to be in the flow, in the groove. And coherence physiologically helps you do that. So relaxation has a different waveform than the coherent waveform. It is relaxed, it's at ease, but it's present alert at the same time. It's both the sympathetic side of the nervous system and the parasympathetic side entrained and activated to power you up. So one of the things we focus a lot in the HeartMath training programs that we provide to schools, to organizations, to healthcare systems, to individuals, is what we call in the moment stress management. I don't know how many of you had this experience, but years ago, before HeartMath, I was working with a company where I had a very reactive boss. I was an executive there. I would meditate in the morning, go to work, get overwhelmed with a lot of work, get really frustrated with my reactive boss, come home drained, meditate again, feel recharged, then have relationship issues in the evening, meditate again, go to bed, get up the next morning, Groundhog Day. And I thought, you know, there's got to be a way out of this. I am meditating. Maybe I need to just go on more retreats. Maybe I should escape to Sedona more, which I used to do every few months, or to the monastery in Big Sur, which I used to do. And it wasn't until we actually began to research this heart-brain system, and I actually began to learn techniques from our founder, Dr. Childry, of how to really shift to the heart and filter perceptions through the heart, and be able to shift back into this heart coherence when I got stressed or frustrated, that I was able to realize I can stop that energy depletion in the moment. I don't have to be a victim of it. And that changed the way I looked at a lot of things. It also activated those frontal lobes, so I saw the picture differently. So this self-management is really important, that we can take charge, that we can learn to self-regulate our thoughts and emotions. That's not repression, it's not venting, it's shifting. As we shift our heart rhythm, we shift perception. And that's very powerful for what the world needs, what we each need. And here's just some of the research studies that show heart coherence training and its outcomes over the years. There's over 400 peer-reviewed published studies that are independent of our own now, based upon our work. But all of these are important outcomes. And again, this is just a short presentation, but we go more in depth in all of this in our training programs, in our HeartMath certification programs for health professionals and for workshop trainers or coaches. So this is one of the pieces of technology. It's called the emWave Pro. And here you can see the individual, one heart rhythm pattern, using our what's called our quick coherence technique, and shifting into this beautiful smooth rhythm. And green is high coherence, blue is medium, red is low. And this changes and gets updated every few seconds, and you get to see how much you are in each one. And it gives you training tools to be able to increase your ratio of coherence. And I'm going to demo this in a minute so that you can see, but Tom back there actually has some of the product there, and you can go back after this program and actually try it for yourself. This is the one that health professionals use mostly, or coaches, because they can keep track of their clients' progress. And then there's the Inner Balance, which is the Bluetooth sensor on your smartphone. And then Heart Cloud is the cloud that provides rewards and gamification and notifications. There's guides, training guides in it. And the emWave 2, which is a little handheld device, and it also hooks into software that has little visualizers and games that operate on your emotional self-regulation. So they're all intended to be training tools. So I wanted to share with you a little bit about our work with organizations and some of the outcome data we've had. We've been very assessment driven from day one, because if our mission is to really create this, help activate the heart of humanity, help create a fundamental shift in human health and well-being, where the mind and emotions and heart are synchronized, then we really wanted to speak to people where they are and not just be another philosophy out of California. So to do that, we really had to do research and really study what was going on physiologically, and then with our training tools, when we taught them and people practiced them, what were their results, what were the outcomes? So we've been doing that since the mid-1990s and have amassed a lot of data. And one of the problems we see today is the disengagement, the ADD, the frustration, the sense of uncertainty. I've worked with some executives who say, I can't do 3 to 5 year plans. Nobody knows what's going to happen in 3 to 5 years. So there's a lot of angst happening in all age groups, a lot of millennials, but also other people, older people, don't know where it's going. And that creates, a recent Gallup poll found that about 55% of people say they have a lot more stress than they used to, and 22% are really angry. And that comes from a lot of the polarization and separation and uncertainty going on. So how do we find that security, that certainty within ourselves? So again, our focus has been coming in through the door of stress management or performance improvement or building resilience. But when people use these tools and techniques and technology, they start to connect with that inner security, which only comes from feeling safe in your heart. And they start to connect with that part of themselves. So these are some of our clients. Not all of them, but we've worked with the Army, with pharmaceutical companies, a lot of hospitals, a lot of local companies. And again, usually it's not the whole company, it's some executive who's woken up to consciousness and who desperately wants to bring something in. And because we are so scientifically based, they've been able to bring us in. And here's some of the data. This was healthcare workers, and this was an N size of nearly 12,000, but we have actually 15,000 now. I just haven't updated the graph. But you can see the improvement in the positive qualities, and then the reduction, the significant reduction, I'm going to stand over here, in anger, depression, resentfulness. And that comes from self-regulation and changing the neural traffic from the heart to the brain. That comes from people seeing and feeling differently, perceiving differently, feeling they can take charge. And here you can see improvements in mental and emotional well-being. Again, same N size, but you can see here like a 20% drop in fatigue. And these are people who said they had these symptoms often to always. Think about that. And in 6 weeks of practicing a few minutes a day, this shift to the heart, get coherent, use a technique or tool, and be able to see things differently because you're changing the heart-brain communication. Tremendous improvements in all of these symptoms. And they were also correlated to physical improvements in terms of headaches, muscle pain. We have many, many more graphs than this. But one of the things people always ask is it sustained? And sustaining it requires a baseline shift, meaning a physiological baseline shift, where there's actually more coherence happening between your heart and brain naturally. Just as you're walking around, there's a neural habit change. And here we see, after 6 weeks, the assessment, and after 6 months, pretty close to the same. So what happened? How did they sustain it? Not everybody kept practicing as diligently as they did the first 6 weeks, but they had a fundamental paradigm shift in their worldview. They had enough perception shift and enough empowerment. Oh, I really can self-regulate. And what happens to a lot of us as we start to listen to and follow our heart is that it becomes self-reinforcement, self-soothing. It's like you now have a new place to go to. And that's ultimately what we want, is people to be able to find that core inside them. So, I want, if you could pass out the paper, if you don't have paper or pen, raise your hand, because we're going to do a little exercise. Raise it higher, and then someone will come along and get you some. And while we do that, I'm going to hook up the demo here so you can see. All right, who, may I ask, would like to be the demonstrator? Who'd like to be the test subject? Anyone? Yeah. Come on up. And let's bring a chair up here. Hi, Cindy. Good, thank you. Put that on your ear. There you go, and we'll put this right here on your sweatshirt so that it doesn't pull on your earlobe. The ear's are actually a very good place to pick up the heart rate signal, where it can really convert the heart rate into the heart rhythm pattern and then look for coherence. Did you have a question? We'll get questions afterwards, okay. So, you can just see at the bottom, we're going to get started here, it's calibrating. And that's her pulse wave at the bottom. And the top graph is converting her pulse wave into heart rate variability. And right now she's focused, she's thinking a little bit. And this is a breathing pacer right there, so she's not in incoherence yet. But what I'd like you to do, if you wouldn't mind, is focus your attention on the heart. You can close your eyes if you want. Pretend like your breath is flowing in through the area of the heart and out through the area of the heart. Breathing just a little more slowly, a little more deeply than usual. There you go. Find a nice rhythm that's comfortable, that's even. Mm-hmm. And as you're doing that, breathing in through the heart and out through the heart area, just if you have someone in your life or a pet that you really love and care for, just see if you can find that feeling of love, appreciation, care, as you breathe in through the heart and out through the heart. Excellent, just keep doing that. Now you see how the rhythm is becoming coherent and how she's getting more green, high coherence, more blues. She's up to 41% high coherence. And here, as she's doing that, you keep doing what you're doing, it's the accumulated score. So there's a whole scoring here as she gets more coherent and it moves into the zone. And this is what a lot of golfers and athletes train themselves on to get into that flow state or that zone state. Beautiful heart rhythm coherence. You can open your eyes and look and see what you're doing. Isn't that lovely? Okay, thank you so much, Cindy. And you saw how simple that technique was. That's our quick coherence technique. It's very simple. It's shifting to the heart, pretending like the breath is flowing in and out of the heart area, and then activating a genuine heart quality, a genuine feeling. It doesn't work well enough to just think about somebody you love. You have to feel it. The feeling is what creates that heart coherence. So, everybody got your pen and paper now. We're going to go back and we're going to do this together. And we're going to do a technique called freeze frame, one of the very first HeartMath techniques. All right, what I'd like you to do, we're going to actually call on your heart-brain synchronization to see if we can help you activate more of your heart's intuitive guidance. And I'd like you to pick an issue, a problem that you'd like more of your own heart intelligence on. Now don't pick your biggest issue, because that often has too much emotional attachment to it. To get a clear signal until you actually know you're in coherence. That's one of the beautiful things about the technology, is that it can help you to get a clear signal when you're attached to something. But so just pick an issue, write it down. Write down a few key words about it. If you don't have any issues and you want to be creative about something, write down something you'd just like more intuitive guidance on, okay? And so the first thing is to write down a few key words about the issue that you're going to freeze frame. And under that, write down how you have been mentally and emotionally processing or thinking about the issue. If it's a stressful situation or challenge, just be honest with yourself. I've been upset or worried or angry or whatever. And if you just be honest with yourself. How have you been approaching this mentally and emotionally? And I want you to write that down. And the name freeze frame was something we gave this technique more than like 25 years ago, because at that time we had these video recorders. Remember those? Or some of you are too young to remember these old-time video recorders. But basically, you could play a movie and you could pause and freeze the frame. So the whole idea of freezing the frame in photography or video or movie is to be able to edit it. And as you edit it, you change the outcome of the movie. Of course, you can always just pause it and then press play again, and the movie will play as intended. What we're going to do is freeze the frame of our movie of life, what we wrote down, and see what our heart intelligence says and how it would like to edit the movie. Make sense? Okay, so you've all written it down, and we're going to do the freeze frame technique. And it's actually what we call a multi-purpose technique for shifting energy drains, gaining clarity, improving your mental functions, accessing your intuitive intelligence. A little clicker here to click back in. Okay, step 2 is what we just did with Cindy, is we're going to start the process of getting into heart rhythm coherence. So what I'd like you to do is put your pens or papers down for a minute. And we're going to shift to the heart to activate our heart's intelligence. So focus your attention in the area of your heart. If you want to, you can close your eyes. If it helps you to focus there, put your hand on your heart. But you really want to take the energy out of the head and mind into the heart or chest area. Okay? Now imagine your breath is flowing in and out of the heart or chest area, breathing a little more slowly, a little more deeply than usual. And just find a nice, easy, even rhythm that's comfortable. We'll do this for several breaths. Okay, now as you continue heart-focused breathing, stay there. Stay with that focus in the heart area. Activate a genuine feeling of appreciation, care, love, kindness for someone or something in your life. Just like Cindy did. You want to not think about it, but feel that feeling of appreciation, or care or love you have for someone or something, or a time in nature or a pet. And continue that heart-focused breathing, breathing it in through the heart and out through the heart. And if we had you hooked up, you'd be getting into more coherence like Cindy did. Now, what's happening is your heart-brain communication is changing through this exercise, and now what we want to do is ask yourself, from this more objective, coherent state, what would be a more efficient or effective approach or solution to the issue? One that will help minimize future stress. And listen to your heart. Write down the first feeling or ideas that come to you that feel good. Just could be one word, could be a whole download. Ask that question. Rather than thinking about it, write it down, whatever you receive. What would be a more efficient or effective attitude, action, or solution? And if you don't get an answer yet, that's okay. Just continue the heart-focused breathing and activating that genuine regenerative feeling of love or care or appreciation. Just quietly observe any subtle changes in perceptions, attitudes, or feelings. That's what you want to capture and write down. And Again, if you don't get an answer, don't worry about it. You can always do this exercise later, or if you just get a one-word answer like let it go, which is often what our hearts tell us when we've made a big deal about something or dramatized something. And you want more insight, you can always do another freeze frame on that. Okay, let it go, and then go deeper in your heart and ask questions. It's a way of asking yourself questions in coherent alignment to get more intuitive guidance. And sometimes the answers will come in the shower, as they say, or driving, or in talking to someone. Okay, now what I'd like you to do is share. You don't have to share all the details, but share at your table what that experience was like for you. Let's turn to some partners at our table and just talk about what your head said or how you've been handling it, the shift of the heart, and what your heart's guidance was. Okay? We'll do that for a few minutes. So if you want to do it in your whole table or pairs, you're welcome to. Okay, let's come back together. Everyone, I know you're having fun sharing. We'll do more of this over munchies at the end. Who has an insight they'd like to share? This last sentence here, commit to sustaining beneficial attitudes and acting on new insights, is really important. And one of the ways you can do that is by speaking it, sharing it with each other. It helps ground it, anchor it, because that's the key to the neural habit change, is following your heart, stepping into it. So who'd like to share an insight? Yes.
Well, I'm dealing with a situation where someone I've never met is upset at me because of something I'm creating, and it feels like it's in their territory. And so I really needed to sit with that and how to be responsive to it. And by putting out on paper my upset feelings, like just getting really honest, like on one side I feel hope and curiosity, and on the other side I feel like attacked and anxious, and then sitting with all of that in heart coherence, like I really found the bridge, which is gratitude, to approach a conversation.
Wonderful, thank you. Anyone else? Who else would like to share their before and after, or the incident? Nobody else? There are some more hands. Okay, over here.
My issue was with shyness, go figure. The ways I've kind of dealt with it was just kind of becoming smaller, not going out so much, just running from it basically. After the practice, during it, I noticed almost like that shift you were talking about, almost like the state I was in with the problems, I was like kind of too close to the problem. And after that shift, I felt myself kind of like come out, just I don't know how to describe it, just had a more of like a worldly kind of view of it. And the insight that kind of popped in my head was just to take care of yourself. Do as much like exercise or meditation or whatever you can to get yourself in this high internal state as you possibly can, then this problem will just go away on its own. So.
Well, thank you for sharing that. That's a wonderful step forward.
What I noticed was in the quality of my space and what I was considering before and after. It's like with the challenge, there was a diffuse, like a bigger amorphous blob of stuff happening. And then honing in, and then asking myself, and I like that you said attitude, action, solution. Because then when I could just put those there in space, it's like in cue was this message of insight, like action, oh do that, insight, do that, or solution. So the coherence was even in the like quality of messaging. It was simple. It was like, do this. So that was nice to feel that the territory also took that up.
Beautiful, thank you, that's great. We'll take one more. There is one more. There, gentlemen.
Sure. So, I was trying to deal with trying to manifest money. I'm waiting for something to come in. And I realized the block is in my head because when I went to my heart, the fear goes away. I was like, just go do the thing you want to do.
Beautiful.
Yeah. Can't wait.
Thank you. Well, this is the cream. This is the heart intelligence. It's that simple, but it's putting ourselves in the physiological state and asking the questions to allow it to manifest. Then stepping into doing it, acting on it, or else it'll fly away. You don't know when it'll come back, right? How many times have we been inspired or had an intuition, went, oh, I wish I'd done that. So now whatever you got, step into it, and prove it for yourself. And we could say so much more, but I want to turn this over to Rollin now because our research and our methods and our technology has all been to help people as simply as possible, and we've got more coming out, increased personal coherence. Rollin's going to talk about what we're doing with social coherence and global coherence.
Thanks, Dave. Good evening. So as Debbie said, I'm Director of Research at the HeartMath Institute and had that role since the inception of the Institute. Primarily the research and development of technologies and tools and techniques and training programs for the past quite a few years is really focused on personal self-regulation, personal coherence. And about 10 years ago, I guess it is, maybe 11 now, we started what's called the Global Coherence Initiative, which is more of the global. And in the last few years, focus has been more on social coherence. So coherence, as Debbie talked about, is a term that implies that the parts of a system have to communicate with each other and work together in a harmonious, energy-efficient way. Make sense? So we can apply that within our body, within social units, families, work teams, communities, countries. So without the social coherence piece, we'll never get to global coherence. Make sense? So it's kind of these are the three primary buckets our research has been focused in, more so now in the social and has been in the global. So I can kind of say this. Social coherence is basically when people within the various groups, whether it's families or communities, can really establish harmonious and stable relationships that allows the coherent communication and the flow of energy that's coherent with the outcome of the group, right? And it doesn't mean that one of the things that sometimes people get used on this term, the term coherence, is that everything's doing the same thing at the same time. That's not really what coherence means. It's one aspect of coherence. Like we take our body, for example, you've got all kinds of different glands and organs that all could look like they're totally autonomous, doing their own thing at their own rate and rhythm. If you really look at, this organ. But no, when you step back and look at the wholeness, it's all perfectly coordinated. Make sense? So that's kind of the bigger meaning of coherence or global coherence. All right, so it's the same thing is true in a coherent team or group or family. All the individuals can be doing their own thing, thriving, right, but yet perfectly coordinated if it's a coherent team, family, group, within the objective of the wholeness. Make sense? Okay. All right, so one aspect of our research, it was actually sort of easy to do in some, looking back on it, but was kind of surprising at the same time. So we call it energetic communication. How many of you have ever used the saying like, God, I was in a room and the tension was so thick you could cut it with a knife? Yes, a lot of you. Or similar statements, right? you know, some of us have been around since the 60s, a few in the room. We had it right back then, vibes, you know, and the good vibes, bad vibes, all that. As it turns out, that's actually real and we can measure it. Not just, you know, saying. So basically research in our lab has confirmed that when we're in a coherent state, the field we radiate is also more coherent. And that field is not only radiated into the environment, but can literally be detected by the nervous systems of other people and have measurable biological effects. So doesn't have to be human, any kind of living being, I guess, that has a heart. The heart is the largest source of electromagnetic energy in the body. So here we're looking at one heartbeat, the electrocardiogram. Right? You go to the doctor's office or you put electrodes across your chest. What are we measuring? Voltage, yes. Electricity, basically, right? That's why it's called the electrocardiogram. Right? So it actually is voltage. It's current flow that you're measuring when you have electrodes, whether it's brain or heart. Okay? But we know from, you know, kind of physics 101 that whenever there's a flow of current, you also generate a magnetic field. Electric fields and magnetic fields are very different things. A lot of people don't get that because we call it electromagnetism, but they have completely different properties and functions. And one of the things about magnetic fields is they tend to go through things. So the magnetic field I'm talking about produced by the heart, and how do I know it exists? We can measure it, right, with devices called magnetometers. So the electrodes don't detect the magnetic field, you need a different device. And this is exactly the same type of a magnetic field that your cell phones all use. So by the way, how does the information, your voice, your picture, your text message get from your phone to the cell tower? Anybody know? I ask that question a lot, and usually I hear magic. Right. Actually, my first career before becoming a psychophysiologist was I used to be a communication engineer for Motorola. And so something I know a little bit about. But basically, any communications device like that, we use an electromagnetic field to carry the signal as the carrier. Right? We all know our phones work inside, right? We have the experience. It's the magnetic field that goes through the walls. Electric fields are blocked quite easily. So it's the magnetic component of the heartbeat that easily goes through the skin and radiates into the environment around us. So you can kind of think of this as our personal field environment. So that this actually toroidal shape you see here is the actual shape of the heart's magnetic field. Not exactly the right orientation, but it is literally a dipole toroidal shape like that. Kind of a complex rotating field. And we're all studied in each other's. So with today's magnetometers, you can measure the cardiac field about 3 feet from the body. Using the same instrument, you can measure a brainwave about 1 inch. Right? So there's a huge difference in the magnitude of the strength of the magnetic field. And we're using almost exactly the same type of techniques that I would have used back in my communications engineering days to decode or demodulate the information carrying on a magnetic or electromagnetic field. We can use those same techniques for the magnetic field of the heart. And I won't go into the detailed spectral analysis, basically. And we can easily see that the information riding on the magnetic field of the heart is very different depending upon our emotional state. So we can look at the patterns being carried by the magnetic field, the information patterns, and tell with about 75% accuracy somebody's emotional state. And so we know we can measure the field, and we know it's carrying information. Probably a whole lot more than emotional states, but for sure that. Okay? So one of the kind of fun way of kind of demonstrating that, this is a very old study, not even a study really, it was kind of mucking around in the lab on a weekend, but it's been around a long time because it's so popular. I can do the most elegant research presentation connecting all the dots, and what do people remember the next day? This, Josh and Mabel. So I have a unique relationship to this story because Josh is my son. And he was 12 when this picture was taken, and he's much older now. Basically, this makes, being family members is easy. I don't have to worry about IRBs. It's get over to the lab and bring your dog, you know, kind of thing. So anyway, we put recorders to measure the heart rate variability on Mabel the dog on top and Josh down on the bottom. And basically, this is an energetic experiment. So Mabel comes into the dog in one of the labs, and you can kind of see her heart rhythms. If I can figure out how to make this red dot work. Basically all over the place, because she's exploring, having a good time. That's normally off limits, you know, having a good time. So Josh is instructed to come into the same room, not to touch, talk to, or try and verbally or any other way interact with Mabel in any way, just to quietly sit down and basically do one of the techniques called the heart lock-in, where you basically shift to the heart and then consciously radiate feelings of love, appreciation, kindness, so on, into the environment. So here's where Josh started using the heart lock-in technique, and he shifted into a pretty coherent rhythm, you can see there. Luckily for him, you better know how to do this stuff, right? But look what happened to the dog, Mabel, up on the top rhythm. There's dog coherence. Again, this is an energetic expression, right? Or connection. And this is actually quite replicable. In fact, we're doing some research now with I'm under non-disclosure, but let's just say a company that makes a lot of dog food and that is really interested in creating new technologies to facilitate the bonding and the connection between their owners and pets. So dogs and horses, I'm not going to show you all the stuff we've done, are exquisitely sensitive to their owner's state. And you can see the dog and horses' rhythms, heart rhythms changing pretty quickly and simultaneously as their owners shift. Pretty reliably, and surprisingly so. This is an experiment here. It's actually an independent study that was part of a PhD dissertation. And what he did is he had 40 people and he divided them into groups, small groups of 4, sitting around tables kind of like you all are here, actually. 3 of the individuals, about 2 weeks prior to the study, were trained in how to get into heart coherence, given one of the devices to practice so they could, reliably make the shift and sustain it at least for a minute or 2. And then the 4th person in the groups was naive to the real purpose of the experiment, had no idea what was really going on. And basically at random times, it's a pretty complex study, very well done, but at random times the 3 other individuals were signaled to, okay, now shift into coherence. And one of the questions was, what happens to the other guy? So I could hide the slide and ask you what happened. But you can see it had a measurable effect. In other words, as our energetic environment got more coherent, not every person every time, but across the study as a whole, a highly significant effect of lifting the person who had no idea what was happening into a measurably more heart coherent state. Okay, there's much more to it than that, but we also looked at the synchronization, heart-to-heart synchronization across the group members. And it was one of the first studies to find that kind of the way he did, and it started implying, or was another study that actually suggests that a literal group field is formed in groups that we interact with a lot, especially if we have positive emotional relations and bonds within that group. There's an actual unconscious communication system or energetic communication channel that's formed that we share information across, largely at an unconscious level, and that is reflected in the degree of, basically you can think of it as heart-to-heart synchronization that goes on. We literally get in sync. Make sense? Okay. So we know we have a personal field environment and that we can measure the fields and the information being carried. So if we take that from the living room, so to speak, to a broader global level, that's what the global side is about. So the Global Coherence App mission is basically here. Basically it's a co-creative project to unite people in heart-focused care and intention to really help shift global consciousness. It's really what this is about. This is our kind of high-level hypotheses. I'll go through these kind of quickly. First one isn't really a hypothesis. It's very well established that human health and behaviors, cognitive functions, and so on are influenced by the background magnetic and energetic fields of the Earth. There's actually hundreds of studies showing this in many different ways. Our blood pressure hormones, many different things are affected by the background. The second one, what we're suggesting is that the Earth's magnetic field is just like the cell phone carrier, that it acts as a carrier of biologically relevant information, and that all living systems, which we all are, right? Plants, animals, trees, humans are all live within that bigger field, are impacted and connected to that field. So basically we're all connected to and feeding information into what you could think of as a global information field, is the term I like. And if that's so true, large numbers of people creating heart-centered states of care, love, and compassion can generate a more coherent field environment that's radiated into the big field and really help benefit all of the living systems. Okay, make sense? So this is kind of related to the first hypothesis. Again, many studies showing that many effects are been proven and measured. This is kind of a small list of ones that you really can't argue with that are well established. Measurable changes in our brain and nervous system activity are modulated by the background magnetic fields of the Earth. Blood pressure, heart rates, number of traffic accidents that occur, and the number of tickets that the police write are kind of modulated by the activity in the field. For example, hospital admissions for a wide range of health challenges, conflicts, criminal activity, and so on. So the kind of father of the field, in a way, is this guy, Alexander Tchaikovsky, who was a Russian astrophysicist who got drafted into World War I. So he was, there on the battlefields, but being an astrophysicist, keeping an eye on what the sun's up to. And it occurred to him, it kind of looked like when the sun was more active, more solar flares and sunspots and this type of thing, that people down here on Earth just kind of got stupid. Basically, bloodier battles and just, kind of things that didn't make sense. So this got him intrigued. So after the war, he did an exhaustive study of human history as far back as he had solar cycle data for. Amazing what these guys did before we had internets and all the stuff we have now. And very elegant, very well done research. In fact, he was offered a Nobel Prize, but that's another story. This is his original data. So we're going to start on the top on the blue line. Over here on the left, that's 1749. Okay, then we wrap around up to 1926 on the bottom of the blue line. This is his original data when it was first published. And what the blue line is showing us is a dot basically for each year for the number of major human events that occurred on Earth that year. So major human events, start of a war, revolutions, kind of global impact things. Not all negative, but major events, okay? The red line on the bottom is the solar cycle for the same time period. You think there might be a relationship there. Kind of amazing, isn't it? Right? So the solar cycle is an 10.5 to 11 year cycle. And Tchaikovsky at that time, kind of an interesting part of the story, remember this is in the early 1920s, right? He also was observing that physiology changed in a measurable way, blood pressure and these different things that he could measure, heart rates and these things, before stuff got here on Earth, before there were changes in the magnetic field and stuff. So he said there must be some unknown factor from the sun that we don't know about. So again, at this time, nobody knew about X-rays, UV, solar radio flux, none of that stuff was known at that time. So he was actually able to see and observe in physiology our changes in the human detector, right, and predict that these things exist. So now we know a lot about that. Now, interesting, a little bit later, and after ice core data was to become available, so you could look at the solar cycle even farther back and so on, a US guy looked at the onset of war from as far back as we know in recorded history. And what he found was that 80% of wars started in a very narrow range around the peaks of these cycles. when there was the most change, either up or down. 80%. I mean, it's way past chance and stuff. So that kind of gives the impression that the sun's out to get us. No. There's some other research done independently also found globally in independent cultures and societies that exactly these same time periods are the greatest periods of human flourishing. The most new discoveries in science, flourishing of the arts and music and painting and just, you know, all across cultures. So basically the way I like to think of this, what I suggest is we now know that during these increased solar cycle periods, there is literally more energy being radiated by the sun. Right? We can measure it. So that's an energetic influx into the planetary system. I mean, Earth is actually within the magnetic field of the sun. Right? And that translates down into human systems. We have more energy. And I could go through multiple studies that kind of indicate exactly what I'm saying and how that's reflected in many ways. We don't have time to do that. But basically, we absorb energy. We get energy from not just the food we eat, from a lot of different factors that we can measure in the environment. Solar radiance, sun just being one. So if we're going to do science, we have to measure things. We've been installing what we call the Global Coherence Monitoring System around the Earth. And these are ultra-sensitive magnetometers designed specifically to measure the resonant or oscillating frequencies in the Earth's magnetic fields. And I wish we didn't have to do this ourselves. It's a lot of work and very expensive. And there are many magnetometers out there, but they don't measure this stuff. They're trying to measure field disturbance so we can protect satellites and power lines and things like that, but not the things that are more biologically relevant. So currently we have sites, let's see, Canada, right here in Boulder Creek, where our place is, Saudi Arabia, Lithuania, New Zealand, South Africa, probably forgetting one, one's going in shortly in Colombia. So what am I talking about? Okay, so if we look at the Earth's geomagnetic field, right, the thing our compass is tuned into, I'm glad we've got one, because it's the magnetic field of the Earth is what protects the Earth from solar radiation, a lot of the solar stuff and solar wind. Without a magnetic field, Earth would turn into Mars very quickly. No atmosphere, no water, that all gets blown away in pretty short order. So the geomagnetic field radiates out into space many thousands of miles. So if we time travel back to science class, most of you get to dump iron filings on a glass plate. Hopefully, yes? You put a magnet under it? Okay, do you still do that, right? We did it back in my era anyway. You know what I'm talking about? Most of you kind of, yeah, okay, thank you. So when you do that, you know, and depending upon the magnet, those iron filings kind of jump around and magically move and show you the shape of the magnetic field, right? Of whatever particular magnet you've got. But they lined up in lines, right? It wasn't this homogeneous black blob. Right? Those are field lines. That's what they're called, magnetic field lines, or flux lines if we want to be more specific. They're real things. And what's really kind of interesting here is magnetic field lines like this can be plucked and vibrate just like guitar strings. Okay? And they vibrate. And when you pluck a guitar string or any musical instrument, what happens? It vibrates, has a frequency and a note, a resonant frequency. Change the tension, you change the frequency, right? So Earth's magnetic field lines work exactly the same way. And what's plucking the field lines is the solar wind, which is rushing by at about 1,000,000 miles per hour on a nice quiet day. Meanwhile, Earth is turning in all this in the sun. And I actually have a picture where we can visualize it. But when we measure these field line resonances, as they're called, here on Earth, one of the kind of primary resonant frequencies of Earth is this first peak here, and that is a frequency of 0.1 hertz. Okay, so that's frequency language for a rhythm that occurs every 10 seconds. Okay, but there's a whole range of them here in this field line resonance range. 0.1 hertz is exactly the same frequency as the human coherent heart rhythm. Okay, get what I just said? Earth is vibrating, field lines is the same frequency as our hearts, especially when we're in a coherent rhythm. And how do we get in a coherent rhythm? We actively kind of walk around in more loving, caring, compassionate, kind states. That's the natural expression of the heart when we're in those states, as Debbie explained. Okay? So there's a second, which I didn't include because of time, set of magnetic rhythms I'll just mention briefly around the Earth that are called Schumann Resonances. And those are magnetic waves trapped between the surface of the Earth and the bottom of the ionosphere. And there's 8 of those. First one is 7.83 hertz. But all 8 Schumann resonances overlap human brainwaves. 7.8 being alpha, in the alpha rhythm, but all of them basically overlap human brainwaves. So basically, Earth is vibrating continuously everywhere at the same frequencies as our hearts and brains. Now, interesting, I don't know if this means anything or not, when you measure the strength of the magnetic fields of Earth's vibrations, field line resonances, the ones that are same as the heart, are the really big ones. And the Schumann resonances, which are the same as the brain, are the really little ones, relatively speaking, about the same ratio as heart, brain, in humans. Interesting, right? So whenever, basic physics, right? We all, back in science class, got to play with tuning forks. You tap one, the other one magically vibrates, right? Showing resonant coupling, that's what that's called. Of course, air molecules are used to mediate and move that energy back and forth between the tuning forks. Magnetic waves work exactly the same way. You just don't need the air molecules. How many cell phone conversations are going on in this room right now? Or the magnetic waves by cell phones around us, right? So how does your phone know how to transfer that energy out of this invisible stuff that's here right now? Right? We tune it to create a resonance with that frequency, and voila, you transfer the energy and information of your phone call. Right? So the point being, things that vibrate at the same frequency transfer energy and information across them. Our hearts and brains are vibrating at the same frequency and rhythms as Earth. So at least we have the basic physics of understanding how there can be this bi-directional communication system between humanity and the Earth. Okay, make sense? So we've been doing, I wish I had more time, so I'm going to kind of give you little tidbits here. Looking at long-term recordings of groups of people around the world, measuring their heart rhythms or heart rate variability for 24 hours a day for many days. One study for 5 months, others for 30 days. So long-term recordings of groups of people. And what heart rate variability really reflects and tells us is the dynamics and activity occurring in our nervous system, in our brain and nervous system. So it's reflected. And this, so we did these studies. The first one that kind of had this big surprise is this study here I'm showing you, which was a small study. And these were people located within the state of California, but across the state. Some in Northern California, some actually in Berkeley, some in Santa Cruz area, some in Palm Springs area. I mean, they're spread out, wearing these recorders for 30 days. Some of them didn't even know each other. They're going about their normal lives. They are not sitting in a room like this, holding hands, meditating for 30 days, okay? So the original question was, okay, are there correlations between changes in the Earth's magnetic activity and background and their nervous system activity? Yes, lots of them. That's not the story that I'm going to tell, though. When we time synchronized the beat-to-beat data in our heart rates, the heart rate variability, and averaged them together, not even sure why we did it, you would expect a noisy, flat nothingness line. After all, why would the beat-to-beat change in my heart rate have anything to do with yours, or yours, and we're spread across the state, right? So the black line you see here is what we found. It is far from a noisy, flat line. What this is showing us is that this group of people's heart rhythms are literally synchronizing together. Okay? Should have been immediately obvious, but it wasn't. The only thing that could explain that is one of our own hypotheses, right? That's something that they were all exposed to or being influenced by across the state. They could explain that. Gee, how about the magnetic field of the Earth? That's the red line. That's the power or the strength in the resonant frequencies. And you can see it almost, you can see the correlation there. Right? And then if we, over on the other side of the graph, on the right side, is called the spectrums. You can see it's exactly the same frequency. These slow wave rhythms of Earth and our hearts are synchronized together. So I would never have predicted that this was possible or could be measured to this degree. This level, of synchronization between the individuals and the Earth. I mean, how many people, I've heard so many people say, well, on some level, we're all connected. Yeah. Now we can put science to it. Not saying that's the only way we're connected. Okay, so this was a study, small study, in California, right? So, caution. So we better replicate this. So we're fortunate to get some nice funding. We're able to replicate this on a global scale. So we had much larger groups around the entire Earth. So we had groups in New Zealand, Saudi Arabia, Lithuania, the UK, here in California, who wore these devices again. And what I can tell you, this is not yet published, we're still doing analysis, trying to make the effect go away, but can't. That this is clearly a global effect, and that our hearts are in sync globally, and that there are multiple types of synchronization. It gets a little more complicated, but kind of simple. So there are basically 3 subgroups that we're seeing out of this much larger data pool. So the black line on this graph is the same on both sides. That's the power of the resonant frequencies of Earth. And this is a group made up of individuals from around the planet who factored into one subgroup. And again, you see this amazing synchronization with the rhythms in the Earth between this group who's also synchronized together. And then the group over here on the right is another kind of subgroup who is still synchronized together as a group, but having the opposite reaction to the change in the Earth's field. Okay, which is not that unexpected, because there are different types of responses to these that's somewhat known. And there was a third group, smaller, likely I would say smaller, and this was a group of individuals who weren't synchronized to anything, other people or the Earth. Probably not the group you want to be in. Okay? Pretty cool, huh? So what I'm really, before I go to this next concept here, kind of my take-home message, or my call to action, if you will, is to ask yourselves, maybe more often throughout the day, take a pause, do an inner check. What am I feeding the field? Right? How much am I feeding my field in the Earth? Because what I'm suggesting here is what we feel, not think so much, but what we feel doesn't stay inside of us. It literally radiates externally and can be measured in the world, and it has measurable effects on others. And the Earth itself as a big whole. So it all counts. So it's really becoming more self-responsible for what we're feeding the field, both in our local and global and field environments. So the last part I want to share with you tonight, another way of testing these kind of bold hypotheses in a way. So I'm saying all living systems are connected to and affected by the field. Clearly we're seeing it in people. So another project we're launching is called it's a global network for monitoring the electrical potentials of trees. So I kind of call it giving a voice to nature. And as it turns out, there's a lot of really cool research right now in plants and trees showing these very elegant and extensive communication systems through the ground, through the biochemistry and so on. Really cool stuff. I don't know if you know about it, it's a whole new paradigm of plant intelligence, and really upsetting the old guard who says how can this happen without neurons? And anyway, it is happening. We're showing trees have memories and recognize their kin and actually cooperate cross species to support each other. I think we have a lot to learn from nature here. Right? Nature really thrives, right? They're very cooperative amongst themselves. Right? So very little, though, relatively little research has looked at the electrical life of trees. So trees are great research subjects for us because they don't run off. They kind of stay put, and they really don't mind if we put a couple little electrodes in them. And we'll sit there and give us data 24/7. And so this is just to give you an example of the electrical activity of two trees, an oak tree and a redwood tree here. That's on our property over in Boulder Creek over a couple months. And as it turned out, they have very rich electrical lives, very dynamic, circadian rhythms and all this kind of stuff. It's very cool. And they create surprisingly large voltages. The graphs I'm showing you here are measured in millivolts. So this is the same type of voltage that the human heart produces in a millivolt range, opposed to EEGs, which are microvolts. I've talked to many and have a few friends that are plant biologists and so on, and absolutely nobody knows how trees do this. How do trees generate these kind of voltages? Well, some new discoveries yet to be made here, I think. So anyway, we're creating this global network, a citizen scientist-based project where anybody who has a favorite tree they love or like can hook their tree up and be part of this research. So really having a global network. So basically little remote tree units that communicate back to your base station in your house, which then connect to through Wi-Fi to your local area network and then back to a central server. And this is pretty much all done now. This back-end data processing server and all this is done, and pretty much all the hardware is being tested. So some of our kind of research questions why we're doing this, the main goal is part of this global interconnectivity research. Do the electrical responses in multiple trees correlate to events that trigger emotional outpourings in large numbers of people? Right? So we know that it's pretty hard to tell anything from one tree one time, so you need to get in lots of trees. There's other evidence from other networks that we're sort of part of as well, that this can be done in other types of devices, random number generators, global consciousness projects, some of you might know about that. So lessons learned from that. The bottom one, can trees help us predict earthquakes? Might sound like an odd suggestion, but as it turns out, one of our friends and collaborators is kind of the grandfather of pre-earthquake signal research. And there's actually a lot of things we now know that happen before earthquakes. Not just seconds, but in some cases weeks, that you can measure. Some of you nod your heads so I know what I'm talking a little bit about. Well, one of the model that explains almost all of the pre-earthquake research that's been done, all these different signals, is a model that's a new kind of understanding of how rocks behave when they're under pressure. They turn into batteries, basically. Sustained current flows that flow through large distances and fairly rapidly through the earth and up to the surface of the earth. Trees are great probes. They're already plugged way into the earth through their root system. So in this system we're developing, we'll be measuring the earth as well as the tree, two different channels, and be able to hopefully have this globally fairly quickly. Because there seems to be a lot of interest in this. So another facilitation tool that we're really just in the process of launching is called the Global Coherence App. So Debbie showed you a demo of the emWave Pro and talked a little bit about the Inner Balance, which is the mobile phone software. So this is an app that measures group coherence. So if we all had sensors on in here right now and had the app, we could actually measure how coherent are we as a community, as a group. And then it's also got a cool map feature that you can switch to and see where people are around the world who are there with you now, practicing how coherent you are as a group. So it reflects your own personal coherence. You can create your own groups. It could be your family, your work team, San Francisco, it doesn't really matter what size. And it's really, one of the things this also gives us is time. We put a lot of work into this to create time-synchronized data from anywhere in the world. So this will enable a whole new generation of research. So it's really hard, or been really hard, to do kind of remote or non-local studies, because it's really hard to get time-synchronized data. You know, even in the same building, let alone globally. So look out or watch for some new type of research coming. So it's like, I'm just showing you the tip of the iceberg here. But it is in the App Store if you want to play with it, called Global Coherence App. You don't have to have a sensor to use it, but you get a lot more out of it if you do. In fact, it's something you might want to consider in your community for consciousness hacking. So I'm going to turn this back over to Debbie, and she's going to talk a little bit about some of the businesses and some opportunities that we have coming up.
Thank you. So, I guess my battery has gone kapooey. Oh no, there it is. So, if any of this excites you, we have some job openings, which I'll talk about in a minute. But our goal now is to bring all this together into what we call the HeartMath experience. When we started in 1990, there wasn't even an internet, let alone all the smartphones or the digital apps or all that. So what we want to do is take our 20 years of research, techniques, technologies, assessments, combine it all, and here create personal, social, global apps, which we already have. The Global Coherence App is in beta, but with some cool design elements and more user testing, we really think it could go viral for families, for teams, for work teams, getting in sync, getting coherent before projects, as well as self-regulation and all the health benefits. And working on true HRV synchronization between couples or between families. And really creating those true synchronized measurable flow states and making it fun and gamifying it with onboarding like you see in Headspace or Calm, and the different activities, progress measurements. We have hundreds of HeartMath certified coaches and health professionals who could be on call to help people. We have books and research studies that the books are based on and workbooks on applications of HRV coherence and the technique practice and what health professionals have achieved with for anxiety, improving sleep, parenting, just a lot of applications. And then we have our certification programs here for these 4 that I mentioned, and we'll have additional certifications for team building. That's in beta right now. And creating hubs. We have some of our certified trainers who've already started what they call coherence hotspots, groups of people getting together, not just meditating, but getting coherent and putting that kind of heart out to the planet, and really hope to do research around all that too, to see how globally synchronized we can all get and lift the vibration of this planet. Part of our theory and hypothesis is that if we can lift the vibration of the field, we can lift the consciousness of the planet and make it easier for more and more people to know and access their hearts. Because that is the key. We have to choose love on this planet. It just doesn't happen unless we shift to the heart and activate it. So our work with organizations too is expanding, and again, they may come in through the window of stress management. Or I've got so many people in law enforcement contacts us because there's a huge suicide rate, or the schools and all the things people are going through. But all paths lead to the heart. They all lead to the same simple activities. So we are developing all of this common content learning engine, common progress engine, community engine, for individuals, couples, families, friends, biofeedback apps. And it's a very exciting time with UX designers and the type of thing we're investing in for this future, both in the research side that can lead to products, to the technology side that can lead to community. And basically, it's about creating heart-based living. And we, from the research, but from our own intuitive intelligence, our own meditations, our own downloads, we feel the emergence in heart intelligence society is going to represent a breakthrough in human understanding, leading humanity into a new frontier of perceptual experience and transformation. And heart-based living is what's physiologically designed for the human blueprint to shift humanity's consciousness from separation to cooperation, resulting in higher solutions to our global problems. So if you would like to facilitate us in any way, I'm sure that everybody in this room knows somebody or knows somebody who knows somebody who might be the right frequency or vibration to join our team. We're looking for a director of engineering to mentor with our CTO, who's been with us since 2002 and is probably one of the world's experts in HRV technology development. And he would like to retire over the next few years, so we need somebody who's aware and conscious and wants to join the mission to become the director of engineering. We're looking for a cloud platform developer, a front-end web developer, and HeartMath Institute, a signal processing engineer, to really start looking at all this data that is coming in from all these research studies. So we have flyers in the back of the room there, the job descriptions for each one. I would really invite you and to help us grab the job descriptions. If you know anyone or you're interested, contact us, or if you know anyone who knows someone. This is a perfect avenue. Mikey said, oh, you gotta come and tell everybody consciousness hacking, because we don't want to just put an ad in the newspaper and hire any engineer who, we want the right alignment. So we will be ending soon, and I'd like to end with a couple minutes, just do a heart lock-in together, the same technique that we could do, and then you can go back and talk to Tom and demo the technology and get something to eat. You can get, we have a sale going on right now, our June summer sale for the Inner Balance and the emWave products. If you don't have one and want one, you can get it from Tom back there. So let's do this. Let's actually do what we call locking into the heart. Let's put our papers down, take a minute, focus our attention in the area of the heart, shift to the heart. Pretend like our breath is flowing in and out through the heart area, breathing a little more slowly, a little more deeply than usual. Just find a nice, easy rhythm that's comfortable. And now as you continue this heart-focused breathing, activate a regenerative feeling like appreciation, care, or compassion for someone, somebody in your life, yourself, the time in nature, anything that can get your heart warmed up with appreciation, care, or compassion. Now, as you continue the heart-focused breathing and the activation of the heart quality, radiate that renewing feeling to yourself and outward to others, to each other in the room. And let's radiate that coherent heart feeling out to the whole planet, to all the people who need a lift. Thank you so much. It's been an honor to be with you. We'll be here for questions, Rollin and I. Take care.